Greetings, Commanders. Gunship here. This video is a recording of a round-table discussion between a group of naval players on a range of topics that we would like guidance to improve naval battles. The video feed is just for your enjoyment while listening. So without further ado, let's dive into the meeting. So we're taking roughly in order. So Gilmore is one, so that's about game mode. Mac is about the charge room destinations. UK Green is about map design, and then finally we can talk about starter ships and RP issues and that kind of stuff. Okay, so I suggest with that we'll have and spend, so we'd say something like 10 minutes, quarter of an hour around game mode, and then we can move on from there. So since you put it on the board, Gilmore, what do you think about game mode? What's your point of view on that? What would you like seeing changed?
So currently some of the issues are a lot of the maps like super prioritize the impact that PT boats have, where it's almost irrelevant to take anything other than a PT boat. And like Norway is a prime example of a map on domination where you have two tiny capture points that are just you spawn in a PT boat, you go around one little tiny island, and then you're in the cap. Uh, in fact, I think there's a spot on one of the caps actually where you have line of sight from the cap into one of the spawn points. So
Yeah.
um, there's basically no reason to spawn in a cruiser on that map, or even a destroyer is kind of questionable unless you go and immediately go to the side capture points where your ship can barely even fit in. Um, and then the third cap is just way off in the middle of nowhere where nobody's ever gonna go to, and is just completely irrelevant to
It's
the outcome of
also
the match.
open to both spawns too.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big problem with a lot of the caps is they have line of sights that just don't make any sense. There's no cover around the caps, leading to the caps, or in the caps. So what tends to happen is if you want to get to a capture point, not only is it positioned horribly on the map in a spot that's generally irrelevant to the actual battle on the match, um, but it's basically just suicide rushing to get to the cap because you're just gonna have to run through gunfire of the entire enemy team because there's no other option for that. Um, a big part of the problem that is, I think, causing this is the capture point sizes, especially for the higher tier battles, are insanely small. Um, so that leaves like very little room for how you want to approach the cap, how capture point areas are designed, um, and basically means you have to approach the cap from one direction from this spawn, and you just have to suicide rush it, and it's just a tiny little cap that your ship can barely fit in the middle of open water that has line of sight to the enemy spawn.
Mhm.
So
Uh,
it feels very bad.
yeah. I'll throw one thing in there. I agree with what you said. In fact, I think I mentioned it in the video I made a few weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
specifically about the fact that cruisers can't even get halfway uh, to one of the capture point where the PT point essentially can go and cap. Now, I do like that PT boats can have a meaningful impact on the game, and
Yes.
they should be able to have that. So timings need changing. I would even go as far as I would say that because PT boats are sometimes so vulnerable, I would be quite happy to see in bigger maps that maybe if you had a PT boat there, you got more than one spawn in that boat. Maybe you could spawn twice. So you could still be relevant. So, you could spawn twice in a PT boat, maybe only one time in a destroyer or cruiser or something like that. They could play around with things to make it more fair. But I think definitely this timing issue is a big problem at the moment.
Yeah. I think I think that's actually a decent idea. That's something I never really thought about. Is if you had like instead of just you have three spawns and ships and that's it, you had like a certain amount of spawns for each ship class.
Yeah, that would
So
certainly be a possibility, and not too hard to technically implement either. I mean,
yeah.
certainly doable. Right. I also think that when you get into those kind of matches, they're all set up to sort of end. If you have cruisers involved, it shouldn't be that the match can end in like such a short period of time. It should be over a longer period. Maybe if the map only spawned destroyers and boats, then maybe the 10 minute is okay, a quarter of an hour. But as soon as you get cruisers in, you've got to move up to at least 20 minutes, I would have thought. For the tickets to go down or something like that.
If I can chime into this, when I'm playing alone, especially with 4-7 in the US, and in arcade it's a bit easier to do this. If I just check the battle ratings, and if I see I'm in an up tier, I generally pick my PT boat first, just because I just don't want to waste my destroyers with getting one shot by all the cruisers out there. So my objective instantly becomes capping instead of killing enemy ships, because PT boats don't have anything else they can do. And that's probably just an issue with compression, but it's still there.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to just like the map design as well for that, because the way that you capture, especially with like PT boats, is usually you just spawn in, you drive around one island, and then you're in the cap for free. There's no fight or anything. You at most run into one other person that's doing that on the enemy team, and you just have like a quick little shootout, and that's it. There's no real gameplay in it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It only takes a few seconds until you see your enemy, and then whoever gets the lucky shot, or whoever is the bigger ship with the bigger gun, I guess.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right. Shall we move on to the next topic?
Well, I've got a few things to say about map design in regard to all this. I think the more I've played Navy, the more I realise that Gaijin have looked at tank battles and tried to do a copy paste, and and the problem is, it would have worked had it not been for everybody wanting bigger ships than PT boats. And they've had to now accommodate the player base by introducing destroyers, introducing cruisers, and battleships next or whatever. But they've still got the same small maps that were designed originally for PT boats. Now, in tank battles, it works not too bad, because you've got an M18 or Cromwell, something that's fast. They can go from spawn to a cap. And the heavy tanks, which technically act like destroyers or cruisers, can still get from spawn to a cap with plenty of the match left to actually still make a difference. In anything above 4-7, there's not a chance. Your cruiser's going to spawn, a PT boat's going to cap within the first 30 seconds, and then that match then is going to be ticking down so quickly that cruiser will never get anywhere near the cap point to make any difference. So these maps are just horribly designed. I love playing PT boats. I've got lineups for all things, 1-7, 2-7, 3-7, whatever. I enjoy the game, but they can't work together. You can't have a PT boat game with destroyers and cruisers.
You all have another issue as well over there, Green, and you sort of touched on it, at least indirectly, and that comes down to when we look at the tech tree, okay? Because the problem is that you can get into, let's say, the Project 206 as a boat class, right? Can essentially get up against an American fast boat or something like that, it'll just outclass it significantly. So it's the only mode where they try to sort of turn the tech tree on its side, so better ships goes from towards the right-hand side of the tech tree, and the left-hand side is, but that doesn't quite work, because as soon as you get down to destroyers and cruisers, your battle rating automatically goes up. Whereas if you are in planes or in tanks, then you can have a heavy tank that is battle rating 1, or 1.3 or something like that, and that would be the really early. So what they have done with planes and tanks is they have done a look, of course, of the ability of the vehicle, but also on its age, right? So those two things sort of fit a little bit together along the way, and they sort of made some modifications to the tree. This is often discussed a lot where, let's say, German vehicles was a bit before their time or a bit better, right? But in actual battle conditions, it was one German tank against 5 Russian tanks. So, different again. But in this game is 1 against 1. So I think they should consider the way that they actually do that, and if they did it the same way as they did it with the planes and the tanks, then you would be able to get early heavy ships that could perhaps be more fun to play, especially if you came in from another game like World of Warships and expected a bigger boat to start off with, right? Because at the moment and that's sort of coming to my thought, is you end up with this issue of having to RP all the way through boats before you can get to a destroyer.
Yeah.
So you could change the tech tree around, and maybe you wouldn't have cruisers at rank 1, right? But you could maybe have cruisers at rank 3 if it was like early ones. And then your battle rating would make more sense when you are playing the game, because as you move through the battle ratings, then they will be more appropriate to the maps you are playing on.
Yeah, if I can add to this, it also has to do with map design. Frigates right now have some weird place in the matches because they're basically too large and too strong to fight PT boats, but too slow and weak to fight destroyers. This is something I especially experience with the River class at the moment, which is going to get a BR lower, but it still has the destroyer spawn at the moment. There's like the K2 and some other ships, which means they can basically only reach 1 cap at most if the map's small enough, and otherwise they can't really do anything, especially in up tiers.
Yeah, because you take some of the river boats, the speed is less than 30 kilometers an hour, right? So it's half the speed of typical destroyers.
It's like 35 to 40 kilometers an hour, whilst destroyers are 60 to 80, and patrol boats can be even faster.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they need some kind of spawn that's behind the PT boats, but not as far away as destroyers, and that's basically the only way to solve their issue. Besides removing them.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, it needs. Right now, they need to really just look at what they've got map-wise, and just start from scratch again. Because the maps are well designed for PT boats. They work really well. There's some really nice little hiding places. Everything's quite funneled into one area, some at different points, and you have some nice engagements. But when you look at something like maybe like North Port, and you've got, I think is it the A cap that's right far out there that we never go for it.
Yeah.
We always either go for B or C, because we know we can win the game at B and C because we've got some cruiser going to A that's going to spend the entire match going to A. So we can win the match before that. And if that's the whole point of winning the match, then we're just going to do the easy version of it.
I think a big issue with the capture points, like not only just the map layout and everything, but like just the size of the capture points limits so much stuff already, and they're so tiny. Like you said, you spend like the whole match going to the capture point, and I mean, sure, they could make the map smaller, but that would cause other issues. But they could also just make capture points way bigger, so that kind of just solves a lot of the problems with a lot of the limitations with map designs that you have with really smaller capture points, as well as it fixes a lot of the timing issues that you have with the small capture points.
But yeah, those larger capture points should only come in with maps that have destroyers above 4.0, because destroyers of 3.7 or lower don't really need those larger capture points, and there's still a lot of PT boats in those maps, which benefit more from the smaller ones. At least that's what I think.
It still comes around to the fact that somebody can just quickly jump into PT boat, cap a point, and the game's effectively over. If you're
but with 3.7 and lower matches, like 90% of your team will be in PT boats, so
no, that's fine. That's fine. That's why I tend to hang
there
around.
will be actual battles for those caps.
It's a more interesting game around that point, but you go anywhere towards cruisers, and you're playing a cruiser game against people that are playing a PT boat game.
Or maybe you should have more capture points. You know, we currently have 3, and if there's through the 2 points that is sort of dedicated towards the PT side, and you're still spawning cruisers or destroyers, then it would make sense. Maybe let's say there was 5 points if it has to be an odd number, right? Then maybe you should have 2 of them, they are for your PT boats and that kind of thing. Your third point is more of a destroyer contested one. The 2 larger ones might well be, for cruisers, and maybe even the cruiser ones. Maybe the 2 of them are sort of not necessarily on a line as a row, but they could be asymmetrical. So one could be more in the one side than the other, if you know what I mean. That could maybe also help to make. But it is the issue here is like they're trying to make one map that fits all scenarios, right? And then I think out of laziness they saw, we'll just take this map and we will just make it bigger, and then we automatically can include cruisers into it.
Right.
And
push the spawn back,
and where they spend almost so much of their time and effort to make us new ships or whatever in graphics design, they seem to spend very little graphics time on designing new maps.
And one thing to add for me, maybe a possibility for cruiser caps is taking the World of Warships cap with 3 layers inside of each other, but cutting it down to 2, putting that as a larger map for the cruisers, and then 2 smaller ones or 3 smaller ones for PT boats. Because then the larger cap is pretty easy to reach. So if you just get general control of the map, you can easily capture the first one, that outer layer, but you need way more control to capture the inner layer because it's way closer to the enemy team.
I think what I would probably look at is you have the BR spread of 1.0 each way. So you look at the max of a PT boat is probably 374. So anything above 5.0 matches, a PT boat can't cap a single cap point on its own. It requires
there are 4.3 PT boats.
Well, yeah, but nothing to the speed of like the 811, which is like 100 kilometers.
They're still going 70.
Well, either way, around about 5, 5.3, 5.7, whatever, around that point there, a single PT boat cannot cap a point. It would take 2 or 3 PT boats on a cap to start capping that point. That way you stop the rush at the start. And if you want to have the rush at the start, that's 3 destroyers or cruisers out of the game straight away as PT boats.
Making it a minimum tonnage in a cap or something like that.
What's that, sorry?
A minimum tonnage, like you need
exactly.
a certain amount of weight.
Like a certain mass, yeah. A certain mass has to cap point. If that mass isn't accumulated by 1, 2, 3, whatever, how many PT boats, then they can't start capping.
That's an interesting point, but I don't know how that would work game mechanic wise. I think that maybe a better route to that would be the speed in which you can capture a point, because you still want one single boat to ultimately win the match, if you know what I mean.
They'd have to make some kind of algorithm or whatever where it is mass of a vehicle versus time capping versus
or type of vehicle,
and then there's different times. So if a destroyer starts capping quicker, cruiser caps even quicker, a PT boat caps slower.
Yes.
Isn't that already a thing with Conquest?
Conquest seems to work close you are to the center of the circle. So whatever you are,
I don't think it's center. Like I played the match, it seemed to be more amount of ships.
Yeah.
I think
whichever team had the more ships in the circle has the lead.
Again, I would change that. I'd start changing that to having a quicker cap the closer you are to the center, because that allows then for less camping in just the easy little slots you can around the edge of the circle. You still want an engagement. You still want a battle. You don't want everybody just piling on the edge, just tiptoeing into the fight. You want somebody that's a bit gun-ho, gets in there, gets towards the center. He's making a bigger difference than the person who's hiding behind the next person that's hiding behind the next person.
I suppose that's kind of the point of like Epicenter and World of Warships, is it kind of encourages that.
That's still
Yes, that's correct. Where you
only
have
gets the
where you have
destroyers to
you
go
have the
inside.
3 rings, don't you?
Yeah.
And the closer you're in the rings, the more tickets you get per round or whatever. So yeah, that would be a potentially good addition to the sea maps to have that. I think that would be fun. And it could also be done with maps that had some islands on it as well.
Hmm.
I think everything that's been said already has shown a different game to what we currently have with tanks. And that's what you really want with War of Thunder. 3 separate types of games that are separated because of 3 different types of vehicles. You can bring vehicles into each game. Planes come into tanks, planes come into boats and whatever. But if you're just going to make a carbon copy paste of tanks using ships, people are going to play tanks if they're not got any interest in ships. So if you create something that's a bit different with different elements in there, then surely you'll start maybe sucking people from the tanks.
Yeah, what I also consider when we talk about game mode and map design is if you played certainly American and Japanese planes, you would often have been put on maps where there's 2 forces on each side and they have to like attack an island in the middle. And I would really like to see some battle modes where you have both ships and tanks and planes all in one, and where you start off with your ships and and people that don't have a ship, they might be given a landing craft with a tank in it, and they have to sort of get to the coast first before they actually can land. And tanks will have meaningful objectives on land because they will be the only one that can take those points, maybe apart from, I don't know, helicopters or something like that. But we probably won't have helicopters right now, but at that battle tier we're in. But I think that if you had that, and actually planes had to take off and land on carriers, and even carriers could potentially be player controlled as well.
Amazing, yeah.
That would make a massive difference. I also think that gives options to maybe that it will be really hard initially to land on the coast with your tank because there would be AI batteries there. So therefore you would need the cruisers or even the battleships to bombard like they did under the Second World War. They used to bombard first with the ships, right? Just like D-Day, bombard with the ships before you can get on with your tanks and then start taking objectives. And that could make for, I don't think that is a game mode that can complete in 10 minutes. I think that is a bit more like that's what you need something like EC for, right? You need something in during confrontation where it really is a battle that takes like maybe a couple of hours and each side could keep going in from opposite angles, and you'd have a massive tank battle in the middle, while at the same time you'll have support from the plane. So really you had to look at, as a commander of that battle, and your people, each person will sort of look at and say, well, what is my best choice here now to take the objective? The objective might only be land-based, right? But in order to get to the land, you have to both involve air and sea in order to actually get in and take the objective. So you constantly have to look at what do I need to spawn in next in order to best support my team.
We did talk about this over the last week, and it was this idea of almost like a battlefield style rush mode.
Yes.
You have like the A and B points, and you get them, and then you move on to the next part of the game. So if it is the first part of this game mode is establishing a landing,
yeah,
then you go through that. So you've got your cruisers firing onto the artillery and everything that's on there. You've got planes in the air spotting other things, and then once that beach is secure, you move on to the next phase. It's like a 3-phase battle, and
like a normal land mass, if you think about it, if you look at land mass being a slow arching hill or something like that, it could just have an initial bit of a hill to get through the initial up over the beach, but after you get over the beach, right, if the battle would be so behind trees, a little bit further down or whatever, so battleships wouldn't actually be able to target anything inland. They will only be able to target on the coast, right? So they can only really help out there. Or it would be something like where you say, well, your guns are less accurate, if you target inland or spotter planes or whatever, your fantasy can keep running with these things, but there's so many opportunities for making interesting gameplay.
Yeah, the phase of once the landing's happened, you could still have an element of the enemy force in cruisers trying to take back and pushing you back and forth, almost like a tug of war style. So the cruisers, even after the first phase is done and the tanks are starting to roll through the hillside, the cruisers still have a potential game in front of them to defend that first cap point still with an element of X amount. This is what I thought World War mode was going to be, a huge battle made up of everything, as opposed to these little small scenarios that are over in 10 minutes. I wanted this was the next phase of EC as such. That's what I thought this was going to be, and instead we're ignoring EC and we're ignoring the potential of what a world war would be with all these vehicles. Instead, we've just got feature of the day.
I also think if you introduce something like where you had all three types, people that was currently just playing planes and tanks would be more interested in also getting a few ships. It will sort of means that actually you wanted to have a more mixed sort of appearance, and especially when it's tied down also to the countries as at the moment. So that means all of a sudden, well, okay, if I want to have set up for a mixed battle like that on my British lineup, well, okay, so which ship do I go with? Which British plane, which British tank do I take along for this battle, right? That's going to be quite a consideration, but it also means that if you really want to say, right, I actually want to take my German tank, well, then you have to get yourself some German boats as well, right? Because it sort of go hands in hand. So it sort of it makes people sort of think more about what they, as they do at the moment with the ground forces, right? If you're into one nation at a time, well, then you probably also want to, even if you're maybe not that interested in planes, you'll go and research some planes because they're just useful to have in ground forces mode.
Absolutely.
Another thing about mission design I have is it's probably been suggested before about the unification of arcades and RB as just one regular match, but with EC as a basically replacement for RB to get the basically a full length of ship battles in a more realistic scenario, and the quicker more arcade-ish battles as some sort of arcade mode.
We might be onto something here with the new World War mode that they're bringing out, because they're sort of saying that they're removing markers, right? So that was normally the biggest uproar from the RB community, that they had markers and all that kind of stuff. So I think that maybe the World War mode would be a good entry point to say, well, actually, if that is sort of the new standard for how they want us to play, that would be a good enough forerunner for run with how endurance confrontation should be made, or even bigger battles that we just talked about that uses all three forces.
And even if we're not using all three forces, enduring confrontation should be naval first and foremost, because there's nothing in the game right now that needs these big maps more so than huge ships.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how the war was with we had this huge, massive sea. Tanks were small village skirmishes or hillsides. Planes are planes. They just go wherever, but they're always going to come back to a small area where they're engaged. But boats they need distance. They need miles around.
Another thing that EC adds is the actual ability to disengage when you have a faster but weaker ship, which will especially be a problem with battlecruisers and battleships, because that's the entire point of a battlecruiser, to be able to disengage.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Implementing better EC for naval would also bring an opportunity to bring a permanent air EC just inside of naval EC.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you just combine both of those.
Easily.
You can do sim. You do sim like that too.
That's true. It would. Yeah, they just need to get the balance right. They tried with some of the early EC games, but in the very start it was almost too easy just to spawn the plane and take out objectives, and that impacted
Oh,
the
entirely.
game too harshly. But I think they tried to fix that. But I think that if the balance is right, absolutely, I can't see why you couldn't have many planes in there as well that was player controlled. And that would make so much more sense for them to. I think it also will take some of the sim players over if they had a more interesting gameplay. Because often sim mode they do in confrontation in that, but it's planes only, and it's. I think some of them like the simulator mode of planes, and that's fair enough. But also some of them just I think like it because it's a battle that continues without this sort of start stop all the time.
Hmm.
I'd much rather come on a night and play one match of EC the last 3 hours than come on and play 15 games of RB that have the 10, 15 minute matches. I'd rather if I'm going to come on for 3 hours, I know I'd rather do. I want a long engagement. I want something that it lasts
Also,
hours. Fantastic.
also sometimes they did not even run for 3 hours, so
Yeah.
there were quite few sometimes, but sometimes we could run an EC game in 1.5 hours, sometimes two, perhaps around that mark. So it's
I
not
would like
really
them
that
to see more
you really need
development
3
into,
hours.
yeah,
Mm.
more development into allowing bigger engagement, i.e., more players. I think all the current player counts on each side have been because when you have the small maps, they don't want a player to feel that they have no impact on the game, so that's why there's relatively small numbers on each side. But many modern games, if you take, I don't know, Call of Duty, whatever, they'll do 64 player maps, right? Because the map will be big enough to accommodate that amount of players. And EC should easily be able to accommodate a much larger, player base. And I think with today's technology, that should easily be possible. I
Yeah,
can't see that being a technical issue. It might be that they need to dedicate servers with bigger capacity or whatever, but
yeah,
it's
but the
certainly
amount of
doable.
AA guns would be a lot, and if there are too many firing at once, it could freeze the entire server.
I mean, looks at the current server hamster. Oh.
Yeah.
But that's
I,
because you're looking at this current server hamster, right? It's not like it's not technically feasible to do it because there's certainly a lot of, if you play Call of Duty or something like that, or Battlefield or whatever, and it's a 64 player map, there's a lot of stuff going on that map as well,
Yeah, but it's
all
way
the
less
time. And,
bullets to
and,
track.
and, and lag time is even more critical. So it's totally doable. It's not like a ship or a plane or a tank particularly moves that fast.
It's not about speed, it's just about the amount of particles there are at a given time. At least that's what I think. And
In
with
regard,
40 millimeter Bopers or 20 millimeter guns, either firing on like 5 or 6 ships, let alone 30 or more, that could be way too much for a server to handle.
Well, but how fast does a fully automatic rifle fire? People run around with it. I know there's more of them on a boat. I agree, but still.
I play a game called Hell Let Loose, and it's a 50 versus 50 set on a 2 kilometer battlefield, a 1-to-1 scale of a 2 kilometer battlefield. And there is so much going on in so many different places. That's EC for me. That's how EC should be working. So if I'm across on the north side of the map and there's an engagement going on the south side of the map, I don't see what's going on the south side, and surely that's how they can render these things in and out. If I can't see something going on, then it shouldn't have any impact on my game. I'm not really up to
And I'm
date.
not talking about client side, but the actual server side, because a single server needs to be tracking every single particle on that map at
That's
the same
fine.
time.
If
But
they can
but
do
that's
that on
called
that game,
that's actually called zoning in gaming programming terms. And so you would have a zone set, and mostly it's actually communication out to the client. So Green is right in that, you do not need, if your ship or tank or boat is like more than a distance away from another ship or tank, or you don't necessarily need to get updates from there, right? You don't need to get those updates pushed to you in order to, they need to all be calculated server side, but all the updates don't necessarily need to go out to all the clients. That's a lazy programming they have right now, that all updates goes to everyone. But that doesn't have to be the case. You only really need updates that is really important to you in maybe a 1 kilometer radius and slightly less up to 5. And after that, your updates, doesn't have to be milliseconds. They can be every 5 seconds before you get an update, because that's good enough.
That needs some larger distances for those updates, I think.
It's in the theory behind it is it's totally doable to do that.
And it's 2020 right now. It's 2020 right now. And we either have War Thunder that remains in a stale point, or they start looking at how to make this bigger. Because the way War Thunder is going to suffer from the same thing CSGO suffers from. Nobody wants a CSGO 2. I don't imagine anybody would want a War Thunder 2 based on how much they've already put into this game, how much they've already spent. The same with CSGO with the marketplace, with all the skins, everything like that. So I want to see them build on what they've got now. I want to play this game for the next 10 years, as opposed to in 2 years' time, War Thunder 2 comes out and I have to start from scratch again. I don't want to do that. I'll refuse to even look at that game. So they need to look at building bigger servers, things that, because other games are doing this now. And Hell Let Loose is in early access, and they're already doing 50 versus 50 on a 2-kilometer map. And it takes you a good while to run from one side of the map to the other. So why can't we start pushing? This is my biggest disappointment with World War mode, because I wanted a world war going on. Instead, I've got a gang at the park having a fight with somebody else. That's what World War has become for me.
Yeah, all right. I understand your points.
Mm-hmm.
So the graphics people that do graphic things, at the moment they're so focused on doing vehicles, right? Because that's what earns them the money. Where really the longer, more tangible view is to look at better map design and make really good maps and make it so. And the problem we have with player base at the moment is that we spawn in 2-3 players against 2-3 players at a time, right? If you just join those players onto something that was continuous running, then it's easy to actually have players come and go from the battlefield all the time, rather than, and then you would always feel you're playing against a lot of players, and you will not have a big wait time. You could spawn in with a team of 4 people in your squad and say, right, we want to play, and it just throws you in, because it's easy to throw 4 people into a 64-player map. That's how many of those servers run. If you look at for example, Battlefield, it's a 64-player maps, right? And they run all the time, the same map. And people sort of join in, play for an hour or something like that, and leaves again. But people are active all the time. They're not having to sit around for 10 minutes and wait for a game to pop up.
Well, that's another reason why we need EC, because if we joined a map at cruise level and a PT boat's already capped A, we're just going to go through the same merry-go-round again. So I just want EC. That's how it comes down to at the moment.
Everyone's conclusion.
I definitely think the larger, longer game modes like EC and stuff should be developed, because they offer a completely unique gameplay style and just completely different experience over your regular random battles. But I think definitely both need to be developed a lot, because your average player who just jumps in, plays casually for, I don't know, maybe an hour every couple days or something, they're not gonna be interested in EC or any of the other longer game modes very often, unless they're like doing a special event or something with friends or something like that. Because I feel like, yeah,
I mean,
just
that's
most
true.
people probably wouldn't really have the time or the interest to sit in a game mode for that long.
I mean,
And
yeah, dedicating 3 hours or if you want
Yeah,
to see the game through at least, or
like
be
me
prepared
personally, I don't know. I like the matches. You just go in, you do like
some
just a
stuff.
good match, and that's it. Like you get the win, and that's all. And game lasts 20 minutes or something. Like I like that, but I also see like a lot of value in a completely unique game mode where yeah, it's basically just EC, just a big long battle. Like I think that's awesome, and I think that would appeal to a lot of people. But I don't think that like one should take priority or over another, or that it should just be one or the other. Because
no, that's fine. That's fine. And but I think a lot of people are just asking for EC to be at least once a month at the very
oh
least.
yeah, no, it should absolutely.
Once a month?
That's
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking
Once
like
a week.
yeah.
one week.
It should be. It should just be like a game mode that is just a thing, and they have like a new event like every week or every month, and they just run it all the time.
I'd like
Well,
to
I
see
mean,
that'd be a nice start. And if it's for a week every month, you still got all the people playing the normal game modes, and then they can get excited as it's getting close to the EC event, and then you see people then also grinding vehicles ready for the EC event, and it'll start ticking over, and you'll see less bots and matches, then more people doing stuff, and then you'll see the numbers hopefully spike in EC.
I mean, I definitely do EC every weekend, so that is.
I think it's better actually to do it for a full week at a time, and then once every other week or every month.
I think a full week's better than a weekend because of just the way some people can't work. Some people can't play weekends because they have to work on weekends, but they could play in the week. And you can accommodate. That's the idea at the moment, is just trying to accommodate everybody in War Thunder.
And it has to
Yeah.
just be permanent, just like Heli EC.
That's what I was about to say. Is like what's stopping them from just running it permanently and then like just setting up a new mission scenario like every week or every month.
I mean, everybody has its priorities and time and stuff, so you just have
Yeah.
to be permanent so that it fits everybody.
Probably a lot of the flair will go off of EC if it's permanent compared to what it's right now.
That's true, but like that's true, but it's still again, it's still like its own unique like good mode. So I mean, I don't think it would really. I mean, obviously at peak times it'd probably be less than if it were a special event, but I don't think it would be like any less active overall if they had it running constantly versus only running it every once in a while.
Yeah, and it wouldn't really take that much to keep it running. I think the one thing they could improve on the EC is if you spawn late into the battle, then people might already have spawned with cruisers and so on. I think if you're spawning later in the battle, maybe after 20 minutes or half an hour, you would be allowed a bigger amount of spawn points to start off with, so you could maybe spawn in a cruiser, for example. That would be one little change, and then people would also be less reluctant to join an EC battle that was already running. Or maybe people should just have a choice. They should just automatically join them into the EC battle that are having, missing players, basically.
Isn't that already an option in the War Thunder settings? That joining matches later on?
Yes,
Yeah,
it is, but I think
it's also set up like that you have
yeah,
the
EC
first
is a little bit
half an
different.
hour is this rolling kind of joining progress style. So in the first half an hour, if you leave the game, you'll probably be just swapped out with someone else who is also was looking for an EC game. And after half an hour, it's kind of locks away from new players joining. But I think that was a measure against those who might not like the game at all. And then they just leave in the first 10, 15 minutes. But so that the other team doesn't actually have a handicap by those leaving the game early on. Oh yeah.
The big problem I see with having a permanent EC is that it would add a third main naval game mode that would just further dissolve naval players,
Yeah, I'd
which
agree with
already
that.
have a lower player
It's
count.
probably best to just remove RB then and put the aiming system of RB and AB and just grab the rest.
I'd
Like
rather
it
have
would
the
then.
option to use AB instead of forcing people to use that, because some people just do not like the AB.
Yeah, but the ones who want realism can go in EC then.
But I think EC needs to be a special event as it is. I think it needs. You've got your AB and RB and your game modes from that. I think you need to have. And look, if we're gonna have naval 1 week in the month, then we have a break for a week, and then the week after that we can have air RB, and just because I think if you give everybody too much of one thing to start with, it's going to be like Christmas every day, and then eventually nobody's going to want Christmas.
That's true, and maybe also if they had it with interval, certainly in beginning, it would give more time to maybe doing a little bit of development in between.
Yeah, refine it.
Just to sort of refine it, sort of, and if there was good feedback to the developers and they would actually listen to people, then I think that would or even if it was just that there was no development, but they had made the game mode so game masters could tinker with the settings a little bit, right? So maybe the plane mission was a little bit gave too many points, or maybe there should be more convoy missions during the battle or something like that. Then they can sort of adjust that a little bit. I think that would be useful. But I also think that rather than think about limiting things because you got a limited player base, you kind of have to think about it in a different way. I think you have to, this old saying, build it and they will come. That the reason why we don't have a good player base at the moment is that the game modes are just not good enough.
Yeah.
They're not fun enough for people to play, and that's why we don't have the players. I think it also has something to do with, certainly if you look at players that currently is playing tanks and planes, some people will deliberately go and play one or the other because what they need is Silver Lions, right, in the game. And currently playing ships is one of the worst earners in the game of the different modes. And they need to take that into consideration. I think Silver Lions per hour is lower in RB Navy than in any other game mode, which is just not right.
Yeah, I think a lot of the reason that like EC and stuff suffers is just like there's not enough players as it is currently, and I think that like I was saying before, your average player usually isn't going to be interested in that kind of mode unless they're already like invested in the game mode in general. So especially somebody who doesn't like play ships regularly is not going to be interested in EC, and even the people that do, it's like a lot of the regular players probably wouldn't be interested in that even if they do play Navy.
And also I don't really like this excuse of having the low player base and then we would just separate them even more, like well, you see, I'm only interested in AC more or less, so you're just saying giving me just a large fuck finger that's play RB and that's it.
Yeah,
forcing me to play a mode that I actually don't want to.
One other thing about this is you need to actually have destroyers and then the good ones to actually be able to do something in EC at the moment, especially with the newer cruisers there are. Because unless you have like 4.0 or 4.3 destroyers, you won't be able to do anything before you get killed. Unless you get a lucky torpedo hit or ammo rack, maybe.
I think like a big thing that would help EC is like helping just the default regular game modes that most players will play, because that'll get more people interested and more people to actually check out and start playing and continue to play EC. Because like I was saying, as it is currently, there's just not a whole lot of players, and then the ones that there are, it's not too many are interested in EC. If I had to guess.
We are looking a little bit at depending on where we want players from. If we want players from the current players that are playing War Thunder, then I think we need to look at combining the three forces. So there's maps where you need your ships as well as your tanks and your planes. I think that would increase the number of people also maybe then thinking, oh, I'm going to go and play some ships, because when I get into that mode, it would be nice to have some ships to do that with. That's one thing. But we also think we need to look at, if you want to import players, if you want to, and I think the biggest community we can look at is probably World of Warships, right? I played it and it's good and all the rest of it. But if you look at it from a World of Warship player coming out to sort of test the waters as it is with playing War Thunder, the experience they're greeted with is very harsh, not particularly fun, and difficult for them to get their heads around. And they won't be able to understand the tier system we have, because it's completely different to World of Warships, because World of Warships are built a bit more up like our games and tanks are, right? That you can get into a battleship even quite early on in here, where you can't hear, and people are just going to say, well, it's not really for me. You know, there's not something there, you know, and they will also they'll look at the aiming and think, oh, this is diabolical, and there's no, unless you look at on YouTube, you're not really finding any good guides to how to aim correctly in RP mode. It seems to be such an oversight. Yeah, and I think also a few people have said about, well, when you get to something like cruisers and you get longer distances, we've got all these radars and shit on top of the ship, right? But we still have the same, like you said, you look on the horizons, right? Eyeballing, right? And you keep clicking with your middle mouse button until you find a target. That's basically most of people targeting.
40 seconds.
Yeah, and that's ridiculous, right? You know, why don't we have a better targeting system? That maybe more adhere to how ships were doing it. That gives some good information about where to shoot and where our shells lands and all that kind of stuff.
Because it's hardly forcing you into these close range engagements, and then the fast gratification that you sink a ship in.
Honestly, to me, the current aiming system is actually nice, because it just grows naturally when you start playing PT, but with larger and larger guns, where you have to actually lead properly, take into account your own ship's velocity. So at least I learned it pretty naturally building up to destroyers and cruisers.
Yeah, and also with all cruisers, most of them, as a lot of the Japanese and many of them have planes, right? So why can't you send up a plane that will sort of increase your spotting or something like that, and they might be shut down by other players or whatever.
Higher angle of view, maybe, like being able to, just like in World of Warships, when you send out the spotter plane and look at long range, you can look at yourselves from above, so you have more of the better view where they land.
I don't like that.
I know. I kind of like this actually. Just this is.
Because it wouldn't get reticule, but it would help you with aiming.
I think we should focus on right now. I guess topic shift would be we're trying to figure out what would be good ways to make the game more appealing and more intuitive for newer players, either from different game modes in the game, like in War Thunder, or people from World of Warships, or people just getting into this type of game.
I mean, this in due time, I guess. I mean, when we get there, Guide announces some battleships.
I think Guidance way of doing it is they're saying to you, go and play arcade battles first, right? And when you've done that for a while, you sort of should transition over to RB. But for somebody that might be more historically minded or want to have a bit of a challenge, that's not quite what people are looking for. But then the whole interface of War Thunder could really do with a massive overhaul. They could learn a thing or two, I think, from wargaming when it comes to a more appealing interface to the game. It's
I
not
agree with
very
what you're
good.
saying about, 'cause I haven't played World of Warships. I've always played War Thunder for the last 7 years. But you were completely right in the sense of if somebody at World of Warships has got a destroyer as their starting ship, or whatever close to a destroyer as they have, and they come over here and they're given a PT boat. That's like I buy a Formula One game or a NASCAR game and I start with a skateboard.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
you know, and I've got to grind X amount, and then I get given a tricycle, and then maybe a
Wheelbarrow.
yeah, and then eventually, lo and behold, after 500 hours of gaming, I get a Formula One race car.
Yeah.
And it was shitty one at that.
Yeah,
Yes.
it won't have a FPE in there at all.
Yeah, and it breaks down in 1 minute.
And the maps are made for the skateboard.
Yeah.
And at least at the moment with the aviation tree, you've got your right side, which is your bombers, your left side, which is your fighters, and then there's some kind of mixture in between of like torpedo bombers and whatnot. So there is at least a pathway you can get to. It's a hell of a long grind still for any new player.
Yeah.
Hey, this isn't what I was promised to.
Yeah, a lot of new players I know, like obviously they're just not interested in playing the mode because of how long the grind is and how long they have to dedicate to it to get to anything that they're actually interested in. On top of the gameplay itself being not intuitive at all, with the way that the aiming system works, the way that the interface is, like you're talking about with the battle rating and matchmaking system with the tiers. All of that is just, it's very unclear, and even when you do understand it, it's not very intuitive or really just all that great feeling in general.
I mean, we are getting there, but if we are counting big ships, larger vessels, I think we still miss a lot of them. So they're not enough in general.
Well, I'm not sure about having enough ships. I mean, a lot of people go and they play a game because of the good gameplay, not necessarily because there's millions of different things to do. I mean, my son plays League of Legends, right? And it's the same map they play for all the matches, right? They spawn into Summoner's Rift and that's it. And there they are. But it's what he does like about it is he says, well, and he's an esports coach for an ECL team, so he plays it from a pretty high level. He said what he does like about it is that, you know, everyone at every match have the same opportunity. There is no pay to win in that game whatsoever. And I think players like that, they can instantly go in and they can have fun, and it's down to their ability as a player and not their wallet to how well they're doing.
Yeah, I'm definitely in that mindset of more of the competitive and gameplay aspect rather than so much of the like simulator or like historical side of thing. I'm obviously extremely interested in the simulation historical side of it, but I would take gameplay and user experience over any sort of historical accuracy in anything really.
So, I mean, I think so far we haven't touched anything really that would hinder gameplay when it comes to historical accuracy and changing it for the better, or changing it to be more historical. I don't really see any damaging, because I think you have a really good ground up that you can build new changes onto. It just many of the things that are in right now in War Thunder, it feels that they actually knew about it, but they decided to just temper with it so that it fits their whatever needs they want the game look like at the end. So it's all boys down being this 5-10 minute game, or when you are a cruiser against a cruiser, then it just takes one good shot into your ammo rack somewhere or charge or whatever, and you go boom, and that's it.
I think in certain things you can see how badly Gaijin has failed. If you take the Kulin F220, right, the way of fixing the issue with that ship was to increase the repair cost, right?
I mean, was there an issue with
Yeah.
that thing? I mean, never
Well, I
noticed.
don't know, but all of a sudden, you know, it's
It
as a repair cost of 40,000 silver lions per match or whatever. It's
I mean,
like
perhaps
they,
at the time when the K2 was OP, then maybe that could have a 40,000 repair cost. I don't
but
know.
but why are you trying to fix the game by increasing the repair cost rather than fixing it by changing the battle rating?
Yeah,
That's-
gameplay aspects.
I think you have to ask the question to the B29. That's the same thing they did there.
Yes, it's another one.
The Culn is 25,000 to repair in arcade battles right now. That's insane. You look at like the Hipper. What is this right now? Yeah, like 4,000 to repair a Hipper.
It's 44 an RB, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Mm. It's just an oddity. I don't know why they do that. I think they probably should increase the repair cost and the different things, and then increase the silver line earning, because I think if they did that, they would fall more in line, be a way of equalizing the silver earnings compared to the other modes.
Yeah, that would also make things a lot like more incentivized to actually like play well and have good KD and stuff like that. Because if you're getting more rewards but you're still not dying, like you're not dying more too, then you'd just be gaining more in general. But obviously, for somebody who's like doing a lot of one-to-one trading stuff like that, it's gonna work out to be about the same for them. So, kind of just rewards better play a little more, I guess.
Honestly, to me, the game is a bit too random to increase the risk rewards, because it sometimes I have a match with like 10 kills for 0 deaths, but I can also just die 3 times without a single kill, and that's what happens to me with my team.
One thing I was thinking about with how I think like historical accuracy, like focusing too much on that could hinder gameplay a lot, would be, well, obviously they tried to do the thing where they had each crew member modeled on the ships, and obviously that was just really bad for gameplay, and so they fixed that, they recognized that and fixed that, which is great. And then we go back to the topic of like fire control. If they were to make it like completely historically accurate, assuming you're not like the person controlling the target tracking, it would basically just be select the target and then just click on them, and then it would hit them like pretty much every time unless they turned, or you'd have some RNG like weather condition to make your shells miss a little bit, and then you just adjust it a tiny bit, which is obviously really not great for gameplay. Which is, and then
I mean,
obviously,
I don't think that FCS is all that accurate in general, or
I mean,
was all that pinpoint whatever for the first time.
you look at like the later war fire control, and that's, I mean, basically it accounted for everything other than just weather conditions. That's about the only thing they couldn't control for that type of thing. So
I mean, that could be a flavor for the Cold War and newer stuff.
yeah, but I mean,
The more advanced it is, the more accurate things are getting. I mean,
yeah. But I mean, like, at that point, it's basically you click on a guy, your shells are a little bit to the left, and then you just aim to the right, and then no matter what happens, you're gonna hit, basically, unless the guy decides to start dodging.
I mean, in a few years, we are going to have SAMs in the game, so what do we
Yeah.
expect? It's just
Sure.
click.
That's what I'm thinking, if we had a system where it would just show you where your shells are gonna land, then it would basically just turn into, like, World of Warships aiming, because that game doesn't tell you anything for your lead or how you need to aim, but your shells always go where your crosshair are. It doesn't carry your momentum over for your ship. So I think that would help a lot with like newer players coming in. It would feel a lot more intuitive for them. People coming from tanks where you don't really shoot while you're moving, it would make a lot more sense because their shells are actually hitting where it says it'll hit.
I mean, I really want FCS for the reason that you could have really long engagements. Also,
yeah,
especially for battleships, when you are waiting for 30 minutes for your guns to reload, and your other battleship is like 20 kilometers away, and shell travel time is like almost a minute.
Yep.
I don't really want to eyeball it, to be fair. But FCS I don't really know how accurate FCSs were. But then again, it could be also national flavors in general.
Yeah,
But
and that's another
again,
thing would be just the balance between the nations for that if they try to make it
I
even.
look at it as a kind of an aid, so that you don't really feel that hopelessness that I feel now sometimes when the engagement is, or my enemy target is like 20 kilometers away or 15, and it's
Yes.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
quite
exactly.
iffy. And like, okay, I shoot there and let's see, or use ranging shot a lot and then see, okay, which of them will hit whatever.
That's
Because
why I
they,
think if it just had somewhere just to show where your shells are gonna land, it would just be it would remove a lot of the really hard to judge factors and really like stop limiting your ship. Because I mean, you can just like park and sit in one spot as it is now, and then even then you're still kind of guessing your vertical lead on the target, and you kind of just have to shoot and hope it hits, and just yeah, like you're saying, just eyeball it from like 20 kilometers, which is not really fun.
because I think
Versus, sorry, go ahead.
even if Firecross systems are, but what I think of it is just as an aid. So at long range, we have said that okay, because even then, those predictions that those systems have, they also have the many like variables like being linear sometimes and not accounting for many more things that it could be having an effect on
Well,
your.
These
one of
things could
the
also.
a lot of the later warfare controls, like they really took into account every possible factor. The only thing that they just could not get is obviously like the difference in weather between their ship and the target, because there could be a big like gust of wind or something between the two. You don't know that, and that's basically where all the error comes in. Beyond that, it's just so long as the target acquisition is good, it's gonna hit. So long as weather doesn't interfere, which
there's another big problem with FCS that I have, at least with someone who doesn't yet have top tier stuff, is that it will just increase the amount the later ships, then increase the difference between larger and more modern ships. With the older ships, you have to grind through, which is basically makes so that you'd have to add another 0.3 to 0.7 BR just because either they just have make aiming with the larger guns easier, or their aim is just that accurate with the more modern ships.
Yeah.
I mean, currently the Fronts and the Sumner has the same chance of hitting you. I kind of don't like the fact that the Sumner is equal to the Fronts in that regard.
Well,
but I think it could be corrected by BR.
Yeah, but that's a big problem. They don't really seem to want to spread out BR at the moment. So yeah, you have to work around that nicely.
Yeah, I definitely think consistency and intuitiveness would be like top priority in this kind of thing.
But I also think that FCS wasn't actually that fast. I think we.
I think
if we're really thinking about it in the current system, where you click onto something, an enemy ship, and you already have the range and stuff like that. Okay, it's only the range that you have, but it's instantaneous, which in real life clearly wasn't. Or even flying the ship and then just, for example, just even started tracking it and then getting the range up, stuff like that.
I especially think that if you're trying to target a ship behind an island, and okay, so you could say if you had a spotter right at the top of the mast, he will be able to maybe see the top of the mast of the other ship or something like that. I think in those situations, you know, maybe as you talked about, Mac, you could have a longer time. So maybe actually getting the targeting information or changing target would have some kind of progress bar, something like that, or some way of showing, you know, that it takes a little while before you actually get that range, so you can take your shots. And if you try to target something behind an island, well, maybe you can, because you possibly could see it if you are at the top of the mast, but you wouldn't have the same instruments available that maybe you had on different places of the ship. So therefore, you know, maybe not as likely to get that accuracy, or it would be less precise.
Because I was talking about this in general. because HK Reporter had a comment about target acquisition and how he imagined it that could work, and I really like the fact that there he even went on and made a little like animation how it could look like having target acquisition.
Yeah.
And then
I think the problem with that, like I think it's a good idea, but I think the problem with that is it would just turn into, especially at like medium ranges, it would just turn into point crosser at person, and then just stare at them and hold a button for a certain amount of time, and then you just start hitting them. And I don't know, I feel like there's not too much gameplay in that, and there's not too much dynamics really possible for that. Like,
and there's also a problem with close range then, where if you
Yeah.
both go from one island to another or something, you don't even have the time for fire control to pick up the enemy, even though they're like 2 kilometers away, which means you can point your guns at them or a bit in front and you hit.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. That would definitely be an issue.
I mean, I think we could still use the current system that we have, like manually.
Yeah,
and for the longer engagement, then we could have the FCS coming in.
No, I think that the FCS system with the current system combined, with maybe in the FCS nerfing the accuracy a bit, that would be pretty good.
Could be an okay idea.
Nerfing the accuracy.
Yeah, just to make sure that the currently weaker ships actually have a chance to survive against cruisers instead of just one-shotting them every single time you get lead on them.
I'm not a big fan of this idea. I think dispersion shouldn't be or combined with FCS in a way. Dispersion is a different thing. It's dependent on the gun and not FCS whatsoever.
So I think that could be like the next topic we could talk about is if you're afraid of like getting one shot out of like really crazy distances or really crazy angles, like what we think about kill conditions. Because I know, Meg, you were talking about how the magazine detonations and charge rooms is kind of insane right now. So.
Well, it seemed to be as a case of another classic nerf from Gaijin, right? So we got this ship called the Graf Spray, and so in order to nerf that ship, we changed everything else. That seems to have what has happened, right? So it's like, okay, but is that actually good gameplay?
Let's nerf it now.
Well, I think what they did with the charge rooms is they wanted it to be more in line with the mechanics of tank battles, where you hit somebody's ammo with a well-placed shot and it's a kill. And I think they wanted to introduce that to naval battles, and with the current damage models, there's really no other way to do that. But because of the kind of wacky dispersion and weird aiming system we have currently, it just means there's a lot of you kind of just threw a random salvo at a guy and then 1 or 2 shells happen to hit the right spot and he's dead, which doesn't make any sense. It's not accurate, it's not good for gameplay, it doesn't feel good for anybody, really. It's just, I don't know.
I didn't quite get when you said that you don't really like being detonated from, like, okay, let's say 20 kilometers away. I mean, if you were detonated from 20 kilometers away from my salvo that traveled for at least 50 seconds, 40 something, then I think it's the enemy player's problem that he wasn't actually moving or dodging or anything.
And that is true. I think people should be punished for not dodging, not moving, not angling, all that stuff. But I do think it's also kind of insane that somebody can just like randomly throw a handful of shells at you, get lucky, and you can die if it hits the right spot.
Yeah, the player input doesn't equal the reward, right? Where in a tank you're more pinpoint, maybe deliberately. Okay, some randomness can occur, but you more pinpoint the place you want to shoot at in order to take the item down, right? So you do that, or you might sort of shoot somebody's track because you want to disable them or whatever. You do those kind of things. Where a ship that is a lot more random, you simply got the length of the ship and you just spray and pray along the side of it. And yes, you do get the map up on the ship, so I do use that. So if I can see that I damage more of the front of the ship, then I will try to amend my fire towards the back. But that's probably as close as I can get, in fairness.
Yeah.
unless I'm
that's-
really close.
Yeah, and that's why I think, yeah, if they improved the fire control to a way, again, at least maybe add something just to show where your shells are gonna land, so you really have a better judgment of where you're gonna hit on the ship, and yeah, detonations from magazines definitely needs to be toned down. Sure, it should deal some damage to the ship, like start like a big fire, damage the shells in the area, damage the compartments in the area, but it shouldn't kill a ship because
Yeah, I
there's
mean,
just too much randomness in that.
I mean, after all, it isn't really the detonation that they are happening; it's their frequency, the
Yeah.
way they are happening. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't mind being detonated when it is like once out of 10 games or so that it happens.
Thing I like
Or
to add, with the current dispersion, even if you maneuver use, especially against ships that have a higher volume of fire, like the Brooklyn or the Sumner or the Akazuki, like even if you dodge or maneuver a lot, some shells will still hit you no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So if
That's
the
true.
dispersion would be tightened, you
I
could
don't know.
around it.
I mean, it was really a bad example if even the Sumner guns or usually the US guns at long range, they are really could become floaty. And I would mean that you were really close to them at that point when they can hit you. So you need to keep the distance so that their shells are like falling. You can see them falling for like 10, 15 seconds before they even hit you.
It's
And
still
then maneuver against them.
10 kilometers when you're in a destroyer. Like they just fought if they have generally good aim, unless you do some like just go on 90 degrees different course, they will still probably hit you quite a lot.
But at that point, I think many people would rely on FCS, and then I really always wanted to use this tactic that they've employed in World War II, where they were following the shell splashes, because they thought that no FCS would actually point the guns at the same like direction and the same point again.
Yeah.
So
They
ships were
wouldn't
like
miss and incorrect for nothing.
always chasing the splashes, so that the FCS is for basically nullified in that sense.
The
And
current
they're always recalculating and stuff.
The current engagement ranges are way too small for that, especially with destroyers where that just basically doesn't work at all.
But when we think about if you've had the larger classes, battle cruisers, battleships, and
I don't.
destroyers in one game.
I'm trying to mostly give input as from the perspective of the destroyer main because I just don't have the cruisers and experience with those yet.
Okay, right.
Fair enough.
So, continuing on what you were saying about the magazine detonations, like you're saying you're okay with it, the possibility of it, right?
I mean, of course. I mean, there were.
Yeah.
And I think it should be more pronounced in destroyers since they had, well, they always carried more HE or high explosive ammunition in general. That is quite volatile as far as I know. Cruisers, less, pretty much less. Like shell detonation should not even happen.
Yeah,
Only there should be a condition when it happens. That is, so when understand it so that I don't know, in the screen it would show that shell detonation or ammunition share room was kind of blackened and destroyed, and that's why you lost your ship. But it's only when there's a large fire actually in the share room, and you are like simmering them for quite a while until they actually detonate.
Yeah, as far as I know, even under those conditions, like I don't think it would really destroy the ship. Yeah, you would, like, you pretty much just lose all the shells in that area. But even like a fire on HE shells shouldn't really cause catastrophic damage, which is.
I mean, your shells detonating should be like have the least amount of chance. We could call it RNG happening. Share rooms are a little bit larger, but still kind of low, like between, let's say, 10%, 15%, we could say.
So, yeah,
and also the other 90 and 85% of the time, it should be just like a huge fire.
Yeah.
Of course, you lose the charge rooms and stuff like that.
Just losing
that's the problem that I have with that is if it were just down to RNG, I wouldn't like that because obviously for gameplay that would be a really frustrating experience where you roll up onto somebody at close range and you're like, oh, I know, I'll kill him quick and I'll blow up his ammo, and you throw 4 different salvos into him and nothing happens, and they're all perfectly aimed, but it's just you keep getting fires or nothing, and it's just, I don't know, that sounds like a frustrating experience. What I do think could work though, reduce the frequency, because obviously the shell rooms themselves shouldn't explode. The way the ships are, a lot of the ships like the Pensacola and the Portland are designed, they have the shell rooms exposed in a way where they designed it intentionally, knowing that if this took a direct hit, it's not a problem. It's only supposed to protect against splinters. But charge rooms still being able to detonate shouldn't really be RNG. I think a good way to compromise between it still being possible, but it not being up to randomness, where one random shell just hits it, and then you can die. Because even with the RNG, like, somebody could just throw a random salvo at you, one random shell happens to go into your magazine, and they get the good RNG and you die, which that's just, I don't know, that would not feel good. What I do think they could do is significantly increase the HP of the charge rooms a lot, so really the only time you're going to get detonated is if somebody gets like a full well-aimed salvo straight into your magazine, and yeah, like they should be rewarded for doing
But
that.
I also think that you have this view on charge rooms in general, because that is how the game taught you that you can win, by destroying enemy charge rooms or chav rooms. And I think it's kind of flawed.
Yeah,
I would really
I
much
would
have
agree with that.
battles where I'm actually aiming for your cruise compartments, actually. Even though it may be a little bit stupid in the general, but if Gaijin went with this system for now, I'm kind of okay with it. Let it be. In general, I like the idea of having longer engagements and then, I don't know, protecting your crew by angling and stuff like this, so that they they can't hit you on those last few percentages and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I totally agree with that, and I think that's where World of Warship's damage model does things really well with. They have the whole Citadel mechanic, which we don't really have in War Thunder. You can throw a full salvo of AP into somebody's Citadel, you don't hit any ammo, but you destroy all the crew compartments and destroy all of the engines, and you only deal like 50% of their crew health, and then they repair their engines, and you can't even deal any more damage to the Citadel. It's completely saturated, and there's nothing more left for you to do. So as it is currently, with the current like crew percent system and the way that it's distributed through the compartments and all that, there's only one fast, consistent way to punish somebody who isn't dodging and is just sitting out in the open, showing full broadside, not paying attention, and that's hitting their ammo, which currently is a little too random. So I think if they made detonations more consistent but harder to do, like they could keep it even with like guaranteed detonation, but if they just significantly increase the HP on charge rooms and just removed shell rooms from detonating, so that would kind of reduce the chances as well.
But you
and
also
then added some sort of Citadel mechanic to replace the one-shot ammo racks, so that you still have a fast, consistent way to kill somebody, but it's not random anymore. You have to keep doing well-placed salvos. Like, if you're a cruiser versus cruiser and you do like 3 or 4 good salvos,
It's just true with the current aiming system. Though it's hard to make that happen.
If you're like close range with another cruiser, like similar time to kill to World of Warships. World of Warships has a decent time to kill. Maybe like slightly faster because of the way that War Thunder works, but also again because of the crew saturation and all that, they'd have to do some things. Which I mean, I have some ideas we can talk about at some point. But
I mean, you also said that it would be better, like having the Citadel mechanics so that it's still the crew that we are killing, but
yes,
we're getting into the Citadel and then killing the crew, and then we have some other crews, some from other part of the ships going there, taking their part. We hit again and they die again, and repeating this process again until they reach the saturation point when there's not enough crew members to repair, and they die.
Okay, can I just stop you both, because we sort of come up to 90 minutes, and you had a good half an hour on this subject, and it's been interesting, so very good. Where I want to take this from now is So I shared a document that you're welcome to feed in, and I think you should spend a bit of time trying to explain that, Mac, in that document. And Gilmore, you're also very welcome to contribute to it. That could maybe then help to feed some stuff back to Guardian. What I also think I will try to do, I will see if I can download this from my Twitch channel and probably make a long video of it. I'll just put some me killing random stuff on the screen or whatever. But the main thing is actually you guys or us talking together about the different topics, and I can post on YouTube, and maybe it'll be a few people that haven't been able to attend that can have a listen if they like. So I think it's been really useful. So thank you everyone for attending, and it was really good to hear everybody's input and feedback to this. I think we have the potential of, we already have a good game, but it could be so much better, right? That's kind of where we are with all this. And so, if we can feed constructive feedback back to Guardian, maybe they will do something about it, because it's in their best interest, right? And there's no reason, because I think the graphics is great in the game. The ability to have, so in World of Warships, you just don't have the tank element at all. You do have some degree of planes because you do have carriers, right? But they're controlled in a very different way and stuff like that. I think this game really have something to bring. So I'm gonna make hopefully a video of it, post it. If you could use the link to the shared document, and please, welcome to share that document and send it to me if other people want to have access to it. But let's try and get people actually interested to write and contribute to it into that. But if we have one place where we add things and improve on each other's ideas, I think that is good. And maybe we can have another chat about this in maybe a couple of weeks or a month's time, whatever people think.
Yeah,
all right.
An interesting chat. A lot of very good thoughts and opinions, I think.
Also, Gunship, is this your document in Google Drive? Is the document that Gilmore should have it after a while? When we say that we are finished, we gave our feedback that could contribute to Gaijin.
Well, after when we have finished with the document, we will now use what Gilmore is suggesting, some kind of feedback channel that they have, that we'll use it for that and do it in the correct way. So we might come up with 5 different things in the document, but if Guardian wants these ideas or suggestions to come back to them in a certain format, well, then we will just give them to it in that format. I think that makes the most sense. But what I would like to do with the document is,
this first iteration is just like a draft.
It's a draft, and it's just, please add different ideas to it, like a lot of the stuff we had talked about. Whoever wants to go in and type something up about it, please do so. And then other people can go in and say, but we probably changed this, and just change it in a document and just put underneath the original poster. I've done one, for example. You just say, well, we changed this and that. But if you're changing somebody's idea, then don't be the only person that does it. What I mean by that is you should only really do that if you're talking to a little group of people, maybe up to 3 people, before you go and change something that is already written, right? Okay, that was essentially the end of the meeting. If you managed to get this far and listen all the way, then well done indeed. You have done extremely well. I hope some of it was useful. So thank you for listening. Gunship over and out.